So it was working, continuing from the last video. It was working, but I was just want to recount a negative feeling here. It says don't avoid the negative feeling according to this model. It says rather remove it as an obstacle. So there was a little bit of a sinking feeling there. They're only getting halfway through this note-taking method exercise I've got. They're not used to the blended environment. I really need to get on to the next task. I'm halfway through the time limit I've got. What do I do? First thing, I think the first thing is it says to reevaluate in this model as well. To associate with what knowledge you know and associate the new knowledge you're gaining through this experience to what you already know. So if I was to associate that to what I already knew, I know that teaching is not a perfect game. That the idea is that students are learning, which is ultimately the goal. And you just try to work through as best you can with the group you've got and at the speed they can do. And sometimes you have to follow it up later with other assistance to that particular group or make improvements to your own practice. The second thing that in re-evaluation in this model suggests that you validate what was actually happening and don't avoid the problem that you're seeing or the actual data as the experience. Regardless of what you've read, you've got to look at the data, the experience, because that's real, and it may need you to challenge your underlying assumptions about how to apply this kind of a session. So certainly for this kind of a session, it requires some more training for these particular students in blended learning method. They would have had to have pre-training possibly or got used to it with the teacher in their session before. And they would have it would work better in a class where the students were already in a blended learning environment, used to being online, used to that kind of a thing. The second thing, so that was very real data. The other data that I can't avoid is that the student at that level required more time to go through this, and that in terms of the instructions, it would have been better to do it either in a longer session or to do 2 sessions and split up these activities into 2 for that particular level of student. So that's for a decent reflection. Trying to go through 4 reflective activities was too much for this particular group within the 15-minute period. That was just reality. Requires 2 hours, or at that level I thought afterwards, in terms of an outcome, would require for a degree level student, they would be able to do it in that time. For a diploma level student, they would require 2 hours or 2 sessions, separate sessions of 1 hour. I noticed those who had a better English language as I went round also were able to do it far quicker than those that weren't, and had a higher level of rote learning background. I just want to start talking about, so that's just an assessment of the re-evaluation. I would make that my own in terms of appropriating it as well as part of this model, in terms of saying, well, that actually is now what I know and what I can apply to my professional ability and bring to the profession, really, because there's few around that know about this kind of experience, critical reflective practice, and I can appropriate this kind of technical skill of timing into my practice and apply it. On the positive side of things, one thing that I noticed was the students, as I was going through, was very pertinent for me to notice, was that the students were not good at listening to instructions from the front. They were not used to it. They were not used to taking the instruction, one instruction, without needing it to be repeated and applying it to the activity. On a few occasions, I was having to repeat the instruction 3 times, and I was going back I suppose, associated with what I knew before as an English language teacher that I used to be. That sometimes you have to repeat things 3 times, you use certain intonation in your voice in order to get the instruction across, and sometimes you even have to go around to assist. But I realized that I was in the right place at the right time to see this, what I would call deficiency, because it related directly to note-taking method in a lecture. In a lecture at the university, they only hear things once. The lecturer is not going to give any special intonation on key words for the students, and often is saying things in a different language, in a different accent. And the lecturer is less likely to go around to check their learning. They check that they've got it, what I was doing. And so I was able to, on the positive side, to really identify that the session I was doing is a very, very important one for these particular students. And I was able to relay that to the teacher as well, that one thing that they could do is train the students and not repeat and write on the board 5 times what the instruction was, because the ultimate goal was for them to transition to the university where they only hear instructions once. So it'd be better to teach them how to hear instructions once and expect that they apply. That will improve their active listening skills, which actually, in fact, was one of the 4 main principles of effective note-taking: active listening skills. So there was a lot of learning as a learning advisor that I was taking out of the session about this particular class, and what I felt was the best thing would be to do is to split up the activities and do 2 in one session and 2 in another, and to focus on and slow it down in terms of training with blended learning method, training them more about how to get around this note-taking section, and also train them in active listening skills and taking a bit more time over that. So that's my evaluation of activity 2.